BoardGameGeek. And at the top is a BGG top 100 games of all time. But what does it even mean to be a Gloomhaven or a Brass Birmingham? Wait, I feel like Gloomhaven has been at the top for a long time. Oh, but then one of my favorite games has such a high average rating but a terrible overall rating? Well, all the Board Game Geek scoring mumbo jumbo has confused me for quite some time too, so I rolled up my sleeves, got good with the calculations, and can finally explain it. Real quick, rating games on BoardGameGeek is pretty simple. You got a ratio from 1 to 10 to pick from. It's actually quite similar to our shelf size scoring system right here. 10 is, oh my god, I love this. 1 is, well, defies description of a game. Clearly broken, and we'll get back to this. But then, these numbers aren't like your Amazon reviews and just simply averaging out the values from people. Cause like, one of my favorite 2-player card games of all time is ranked 12,000th. That can't be right. But then that also does make sense. Look at all the who the heck knows about these games that technically have the highest scores on the website. Rather, we must use some mumbo jumbo formula calculations for something I did some research on called a geek score. Now this uses a formula called a Bayesian Average. Yep, I told you it was gonna be geeky. Essentially, this tries to average out the numbers in a supposedly more useful way by adding fake votes, or dummy votes to every single game. What do the fake votes do? They always vote the game average, or 5.5 out of 10. If no human votes on the game is a 5.5 geek score rating. But then as people slowly vote more and more on the game, the result drifts away from my 5.5 to a new value. So even if you hate the game so much when it just came out and rate it a 1 out of 10, the game doesn't immediately drop to a 1 out of 10. Rather, that's just a very tiny blip that's averaged out with a bunch of 5.5 votes. Obviously, when a bunch of people vote 1 out of 10, then the geek score starts drifting that way. Formula for this geek score, it is this, bam. Look at all that math stuff. We actually know everything here from either BGG itself or from the average of 5.5. We just don't know the number of dummies. After doing some research and plugging in numbers myself, this seems to be about 1,450. The exact number seems to change a bit depending on the game, whatever BGG is doing in their back end, but this is right enough for the purpose of this video. Sweet, so now all we need is a game, Gloomhaven, let's go. Add up everyone's score ratings, that's a big number, 465,932. Then we got number of ratings, wow, that's actually a lot of Gloomhaven campaigns at 53,504. So then we have two big numbers over each other. Do the math, and 8.62. Wow, that's actually really close for not knowing the exact number of dummies. Let's try another example. This random family game called Flamme Rouge, hopefully I'm saying that right. Add up your total scores, plug in the total votes, and divide, and yep, 7.336. Compared to the actual geek score, pretty darn close. Try it out for yourself. Here's the formula again. Haha, just kidding, no pressure to do that. It's actually a little bit annoying to do, but really cool to know about. So now that we know how the score works, let's play around with it a bit. Like say there's a super duper new hyped game that came out, and there's 1,450 votes of a 10 out of 10 without even playing the game for some reason. So what happens to the geek score with this system? Well, that lands us with a 7.75 geek score, which lands us in the BGG top 50 between Maracaibo and On Mars. And that was with only 1,450 votes of a 10 out of 10 to get so high on the BGG top 100. This leads us to our first concern with this geek score system, aka Bayesian averages, which is it might not actually be giving enough dummy votes. This current dummy value of about 1450 is supposed to be based on how big BGG is, that is, how many accounts there are. But then, what happens when a super hype Kickstarter is going on and people are really excited for it and start rating it a 9 out of 10 or a 10 out of 10 even before the game comes out? Look, you can't rate it 10 out of 10, always will play, because the game itself doesn't really exist, only the campaign does. You can't play it. That's how you get Tainted Grail, The Fall of Avalon, a game firmly in the top 100. But when you keep playing the game past the first couple of chapters, you realize that the actual balance and implementation of surviving is kinda doggy doo-doo. It's worrying that maybe someone is just so hyped for the game, and then plays it once to confirm their faked hype rating of a 10 out of 10. and so they don't change their score and then move on to other things. Their final score for Tainted Grail: The Fall of Avalon is a 10 out of 10, which is incredibly misleading for someone looking for a soundly designed game. Maybe as crowdfunding through Kickstarter and Gamefound becomes more of a popular way to get games, unpublished games could just not have geek scores or prevent voting altogether? If you're spending $300 on a game as opposed to normally like $60, maybe you're more likely to feel polarized about it, so a 10 out of 10 or a 1 out of 10 is your final vote. Maybe? Voting tendencies can continue down this weird path because you have people also voting a game a 1 out of 10 even before they played it because they're trying to balance out the 10 out of 10s. Yeah, I mean, I get what you're trying to do, but like, do you think this game is clearly broken? No, you have this other weird agenda here. Also, let's clarify the BGG rankings, because these might be kind of confusing if you've come from any sort of school, which says that, 6 out of 10, that's like 60%, that's a D-. Man, that means garbage, you're almost failing. Whereas, actually, a 6 out of 10 means okay game, some fun or challenge at least, we'll sporadically play it if in the right mood. That also brings us to some pretty inconsistent times when people vote. Some people only play a game once, like a learning game, and then rate the game. Others insist on playing a game multiple times. You can tank the score because you're unhappy with how the game was delivered to you or how the company handles its Kickstarter campaign. Is everyone voting a game based off the actual BoardGameGeek system, or are they using their own made-up criteria? Because I've seen plenty of glowing reviews that gave a 4 out of 10. Are they saying they just didn't like it but think it's a good game? Or how about how BGG rankings are how likely you are to play the game again? But if you beat a campaign game, are you likely to play the game again? Are people voting whether or not they think it's a soundly well-designed game, or whether or not they enjoy it? Maybe there should be 2 scores, like a more objective one and a more subjective one, like how Shelfside does it? You've probably heard about the movie website IMDb, which also applies mumbo jumbo to their movie review averages to get a final score. Movie scoring has its own weirdness, but at the end of the day, a movie is just something you watch. Whatever moving pixels and sounds you are encountering are exactly the same as everyone else. Going back to board games are weird, man. Like, they're just pieces of cardboard moving around with certain rule sets, and being games means that they can often be made to play in different player counts or don't even show their true colors at first. But then you have people rating multiplayer-centric board games based off only solo plays, or solo-centric board games rated only on multiplayer sessions. Or maybe you rate it after playing it once with the wrong rules because maybe the rulebook is too confusing, but the game is actually sound. Let's think about the general board game experience too, where you have to buy the game for a decent chunk of change and then bring it home, open it up, punch out all the pieces, and then you have to read the rules and then set the game up and then find friends willing to play with you and teach it to them. This is quite a bit of work, so chances are if you don't think you'll like a game, then you're probably not going to ever play it. This is why some more expensive, long games would never get rated by people who would never play a game like that. Because if someone who didn't like negotiation and area control somehow got persuaded to spend 6 hours playing TI4, chances are they would rate it pretty low. This makes so many big games, from Star Wars Rebellion, Gaia Project, and Eclipse, just tend to not have a lot of middling or low ratings. Whereas for a movie, even if you think you won't like it, there's a chance you could be persuaded into watching it since it doesn't take any effort to learn. You can even hate watch movies. You can't really hate watch board games, at least the ones that aren't fillers, because they take just so much more work to do as a thing. Like, I am a board game reviewer in title that's played a ton of board games, but I've played less than half of the BGG Top 100. I just don't have that much time. Board games having this inherent barrier really uplifts ratings of second editions or re-implementations of games. If you liked the game previously, you'll probably play the new version and also rate it highly, probably higher than before since it's an updated game. If you didn't like it before, you're just probably not going to bother with it, so you don't have an actual rating of the game. See Pandemic Legacy dominating this top 100 list, Clank Legacy really high at only under 7,000 votes, or even the standalone expansion of Dominion, Dominion Intrigue, making the top 100 over base Dominion, which is what people know Dominion for. Oh, and then Great Western Trail and Eclipse all show up twice on this list. And this revised Agricola is on the list as well as the original. Why are these games allowed to take up so many spots? And we know that BGG sometimes does disqualify games, like Mage Knight having a super high geek score for its ultimate version that is listed as not applicable for the BGG top 100 rating. So does this mean all ultimate editions of games are disqualified? That doesn't seem to be the case. Who is making these decisions? What is the consistency? Mods, please. Then maybe votes on digital plays of games should be disqualified because Gloomhaven digital, I know it's good, but that's not really the box board game experience. Or maybe, just maybe at the end of the day, some people just got tired of voting low on games, so there's a sort of rating inflation. I can't really say for sure, there's just so many weird things that can happen with voting. To round it all out, not every board gamer uses BoardGameGeek. I mean, here at Shelfside, we own quite a bit of games, okay? But we don't really rate anything on BoardGameGeek. I have my high school scores on the website, and Daniel doesn't use it at all for scoring. Maybe there could be a way for BoardGameGeek to encourage people to vote on games they own. That is, games they own that are published so you don't get weird Kickstarter hype. For all this criticism, the BGG Top 100 is still a pretty solid assessment on what games are popular. Sure, we have concerns on certain voting habits or implementations of voting on unpublished games, but there's still a certain quality in quantity of votes, even if BGG is far from a reflection of all board gamers out there. Popularity still means the game got a ton of 9 out of 10 or 10 out of 10 votes to override the dummy votes, and that activity is worth checking out. The way this final geek score gets actualized though is funny. See Blood Rage at 41,000 votes versus The Crew Deep Sea at 8,500 votes, which are both games handily in the top 50. Use that quantity as a huge point of interest if you're already looking at games at a glance. If you're new to the hobby, it's good to be wary of groupthink, but to also go in with an open mind to see what popular games may end up aligning with your tastes. The relevance of this BGG Top 100 is here to stay. After all, the most popular board game website shows this list when you click all board games. And you used to be able to clearly see the BGG Top 10 when you went to the huge board game subreddit, though when they took this list off, I have no idea. When? Basically, what I'm trying to say is that it's cool to know how the BGG geek score system works and its limitations. It's really up to you, the board game connoisseur, to read and watch reviews to figure out what really works for you. That is, keep watching Shelfside for more reviews on board games. See what I did there? This whole video just kind of came full circle for Shelfside. Yeah. Thanks for watching the video. As always, let me know what you think. Maybe you have more thoughts on BGG as a whole. Thanks to our patrons. Yeah, over here. Thank you guys so much for making videos like this possible. And then we got a little sneak peek for you guys that I am working on a really big ISS Vanguard review. That is, I am playing the game a lot to see how the campaign goes. So yeah, excited for that one. And also thank you to our Man That's a Cardboard right here, over there. Yeah. Remember to like, comment, subscribe. Yeah. Any more ideas on how to improve BGG is always a good idea.